A biblical perspective on life, culture and current events. This is 2020 on Vision.
Vision. And by the way, I just have to apologize for the voice today because I have come down to cold and flu, so the voice is a little bit strange today.
Okay, well, it's sounding fine from our end, and so let's get into our conversation. Hey, Yasmin, you are doing a fabulous job in Victoria. You're across a whole lot of issues, but there's a very serious, very big issue that's brewing right now in Victoria, and it's around anti-vilification laws. And we know that Victoria has sort of led the way in these sorts of laws that have a huge impact on free expression of Christian faith. Give us your overall view of what's coming in Victoria.
Yes, thanks, Neil. So I just want to clarify, as you mentioned, is brewing. So what it means is that we haven't have the bill yet, but we are in a final consultation recently. So what we see is that according to the latest consultation, so based on that and based on the overview paper that is released a few weeks ago, I think this is how the government is going to draft the bill. But we just don't want to wait until we see a bill. It's because by then it will be too late. Therefore, we have been asking people to make submission. And even now, we still ask people to send email to the Premier as well as the Attorney General. So it's very important. So about the overview, I'll just give you a bit of background. In Victoria at the moment, and for over 2 decades, we have this Racial and Religious Tolerance Act, which protects race and religious beliefs and activities. So pretty much for 2 decades, there is no one case. It's just one, to be honest, for a Muslim and to deal with the Muslim and Christian leaders conflict. But so far, everything is fine. But in 2019, Fiona Patten, the founder and leader of Reason Party, if you remember, so she tabled a private member bill. And the reason is because she thinks that this Racial and Religious Tolerance Act is not enough to protect certain group of people. For example, those in the LGBTIQ community, those with HIV, and those who are disabled. So she bring in a private member bill to add in all these protected attributes that include gender identity, sexual orientation, disability, and people with HIV, for example. But as a common practice, Labor government in Victoria doesn't support private member bill. So her bill actually went to inquiry in 2019. And last year, there is a push by the Greens for the new government after the election to bring in the anti-vilification law as soon as possible. And there is also another push this year. So last year, there is one public consultation. And this year, just recently, there is another one, which is a final one before a bill being drafted and tabled.
And just before we get into a few of the details around this and what this means, there are some clever ways that our governments around Australia are pushing through these sorts of laws very quickly and minimising the public consultation process and minimising the debate and pushing these things through quickly. Is this something that you're anticipating would happen if you're not talking about this early?
Yes, definitely. So what we see is that we only have 2 sitting weeks left before Christmas come. So it's a very short period of time. But unfortunately, the Attorney General just recently, she said that she is going to introduce this bill this year. So I'm just wondering, 2 sitting weeks left, how are they going to bring in unless they are ramping everything through again? So what I see is that it's really important that we do something now and get the voice out and get our concern out. And hopefully that we will put pressure on the government to back down. And hopefully we are not going to see a bill this year, but next year, so that we can lobby the government and as well as making sure the opposition is going to make sure that this bill, if it comes, will have a right balance in it.
Yasmin, let's not leave anyone behind in a conversation that could get, a little bit complicated. But when we're talking about vilification, we're talking about hate speech. And I guess the end game, where a Christian might be very concerned about this and their own safety, is that when holding to a biblical truth, if that becomes considered to be hate speech, then these vilification laws affect that individual. This is pretty serious, isn't it, to understand that this is happening in the state of Victoria?
Yes, I would say if we think that the conversion law passed in Victoria is bad and draconian, I would say this anti-vilification law, based on what is stated in the overview paper, is even worse because it's like the tentacles actually expand everywhere. So there are three main concerns based on the overview paper that I want to share with your listener. The first one is that under this proposed law, speech and conduct, whether it is in the public or online, including email, could be considered unlawful vilification if someone with a protected attribute feels that it is reasonably likely to cause harm. Now, I'll just give two examples. One is that the legal test to prove incitement-based vilification is lower to public conduct that is likely to incite as opposed to actually incite. And another is that the harm-based protection is not only the vilification threshold is lower, but it's also subjective. I just want to quote this from the overview paper that say, hate speech or conduct could amount to vilification if it is reasonably likely to be considered harmful from the perspective of a person or a member of a group with that attribute. What it means is that someone could report anyone to the authorities, not because actual harm was caused or intended, but simply because they felt that it was likely. And you just see that Christians could be reported to the Victorian Equal Opportunity Human Rights Commission and VCAT by someone with a protected attribute who feels and thinks a Christian's public speech or email or social media post is offensive, despite no actual harm was caused or intended. Now, I just want to bring one example. Israel Folau, for example, back in 2019, he posted a scripture, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 9 to 10, on social media, just a scripture without inciting hatred, without vilifying anyone, but he got into trouble and led to a multi-million dollars of legal case.
So, what we might discover as various verses in the Bible would, under then Victorian law, be considered to be hate speech. That's where limiting what is said in churches becomes a real risk, because then churches are under an obligation not to preach biblical truth. I guess that has to be something. If that doesn't ring the alarm bells for freedom, nothing will.
Yes, that is exactly another concern that I have, because in the overview paper, it said that this law will extend to private setting that includes schools and workplace. Let me quote this again. It says, conduct might be considered public, even if it occurs or to the general public. This might occur in a school. This is that teaching biblical or biblical beliefs such of men and women at a Christian school or church could be considered hate speech if someone finds it offensive. Just imagine we are running Alpha course, for example. We invite non-Christians to the church. There is video, there is message about sin and forgiveness. There is Bible study, for example. If someone, non-Christian, who has been invited to the church to go through that program and find the message of sin offensive, then the person who delivered the program could be reported to the authorities.
Well, and it's not just churches, but as you indicate, it's schools, it's going to be tertiary level study institutions, it's going to be aged care, it's going to be child care, it's all of the welfare arms of the church, which are huge and very extensive. And here is government policy wanting to limit the way that the church tells truth. Those things are really, really disturbing.
Yes.
Give us another thought here about extraterritorial ways that these things are going to be potentially implemented.
Yes, Neil, unfortunately, I have to say it's not only I will be impacted because I'm in Victoria, but you in Queensland or our CEO, Michelle Pearce in Canberra, could be impacted as well. It's because, for example, the incitement and harm-based protections could capture communication online and in email, which occurred within Victoria or elsewhere. What it means is that if someone outside Victoria found to be vilifying someone in Victoria with the protected attribute, that interstate person could be investigated or prosecuted as well. Now, I'm not quite sure whether you remember there is a case that we mentioned a few weeks ago in Vision. There's a Victorian lady called Yasmin Sussex. That case is reported in the Herald Sun in Victoria. So this lady in Victoria is a breastfeeding expert, and she put a number of posts on social media about a Queensland trans mom, which means a biological mom. And this trans mom, she wants to use medication to induce milk to breastfeed the newborn baby. So, of course, from a expert perspective, she disagreed, and Jasmine Sussex put a few posts there, and that offends the Queensland trans mom, and so Jasmine Sussex was brought to the Queensland Tribunal, and the case is still ongoing. So that is not without precedent.
Okay, let's talk about how this might limit religious activities and practices. We're talking either in church or in any of the parachurch organisations I mentioned, could even be in the workplace where you've got Christians in charge. This thought about religious practices or activities serving what is called a genuine purpose. How do we understand that, Jasmine?
Is actually very concerning. I'll just read you the quote again because I think it's really important to get the idea right. So in the overview paper, it said it is proposed that the current public interest exception be changed so that any statement, publication, discussion, or debate made for any genuine purpose that is in the public interest would not amount to vilification. It sounds good, but wait until we read the second half. It said the added requirement of genuine means that a person would only be able to rely on the exception where their purpose for engaging in the conduct was truly in the public interest. Now, the questions that we need to ask here is, who is to determine what is genuine purpose and truly in the public interest? What it means is that sharing the gospel message of sin and forgiveness could be considered hate speech if someone deems it offensive and not to be in the public interest. For example, in Victoria, just a couple of weeks ago, we already see crosses at a school being asked, some students with the cross jewelry, they are asked to remove the crosses because some other students find the crosses offensive. So that is already happening. And what about street evangelism? Preaching at church could be, under risk because there is no guarantee. And also one of the things I think ACL's work in Victoria, for example, are flyers, social media posts, videos, emails, all this could be impacted as well. And of course, because if the interstate people could get to be investigated as well, that will include some of the emails from Michelle Pearce, for example, that is quite concerning.
Very concerning. Hey, and when we talk about racial and religious vilification and these sorts of bills that are set up And it seems to be quite deceptive to say that it's there to protect racial and religious vilification, because it does appear that the protections that might have been suggested have been evaporating, and there's no protection for Christians in all of this. Is there anything that you can see as a redeeming factor that might be a protection for Christians in what's being proposed?
Well, according to the view of the government, they always say that there is protection for Christian community and the faith communities based on the Victorian Charter of Human Rights and Responsibilities. The problem is that I saw how the conversion law bill is drafted. So if, according to this charter actually protects the freedom of expression, conscience, and religion, including parental rights. If this charter is protecting all these rights, which means the conversion law is actually not compatible. But unfortunately, in the first section of the conversion law is actually saying of charter, and as is that these conversion law compatible charter. So when I look, it means that this charter is not going to provide sufficient protection for the religious community, especially the Christian community here, which means there is no guarantee that preaching and teaching of biblical sexual ethics, God's creation of male and female, and the gospel message of sins and forgiveness will be sufficiently protected under the influence of identity politics. And also all these proposed subjective elements into the law. So the charter is not going to protect the Christian community.
A very insightful set of details that you have delivered to us today, Yasmin. Time has run out. I just want to mention very quickly, there is a Rainbow Toolkit paper petition, already more than 4,500 signatures on that. A quick encouragement for you. Is that something you want listeners to take up and sign?
No, it's already closed, but because that paper petition has more than 2,000, so is actually, it will trigger a debate, and the debate will come next year, so which is a good thing. And just remind your listener, so these Rainbow Toolkits actually allow librarians to ask children as young as 5 about their preferred pronouns when they come to the library. So it's good that the Liberal National Party actually has committed to scrap it if they form government. But now the Liberal National Party MP has launched this petition, and which is good. We are going into debate next year.
Okay, all right. So for listeners, more details on the Australian Christian Lobby website. Yasmin Yuen is the ACL State Director for Victoria. Yasmin, a good, well-rounded overview and getting into some of the detail about what's coming potentially there in Victoria. Yasmin, thank you so much. The ACL website is acl.org.au. acl.org.au. I often will say, if you want to be informed about what's going on in your state or territory, you'll find all sorts of good resources there, including articles that simply explain some of the complexities of what's happening politically in your backyard. acl.org.au. Yasmin, thanks so much for your update today on 2020.
Thank you, Neil.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.